So good afternoon and welcome to NVAHA's January Lunch and Learn. Thank you for joining us and for your interest in this month's topic. My name is Amanda Karin and I'm NVAHA's Loudon Director. I'm joined today by my NVAHA colleagues as well as valued members of our Board of Directors and our Leadership Council. For today's program, we will hear from former Delegate Ken Plum, the longest serving member of the General Assembly with 44 years of service, about how the General Assembly session works and where key decisions are made. We will focus on practical ways that advocates can engage with their legislators, communicate priorities, and show up effectively during the session. Also hear from our own Anika Rahman, NVAHA's Fairfax director, on key housing bills introduced this session, highlighting proposed policies to watch and opportunities for advocates to take action. And at this time, I'll turn the microphone over to Anika to introduce herself and catch us up on housing bills to watch this session.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Welcome, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Anika Rahman. I am the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing NVAHA Fairfax Director. Before coming here, I was in the General Assembly as Legislative Director, Delegate Maldonado. I've worked 7 sessions so far. This is my first session. I will not be going back. So this is my way of living through it virtually because I really enjoyed session. So I'm going to go through some quick things. As you know, there are tons of bills. We have close to 200 bills this year. The General Assembly, I've chosen to talk about top 10. They're not necessarily representation of all the bills we support or don't support, but these are the most 10 popular ones that we've seen coming up as priority for many organizations. And just some key things. The General Assembly's role in housing are really for housing law and authority, zoning and housing enable statutes, tenant protection, state funding, and preemptions, as well as some basics. This year, it is an even year, so 60 days. The delegates do not have any bill limits. For that reason, there's a tons of bills in the House of Delegates, and the State Senate have a bill limit of 26, and for that reason, there's a little bit less on the Senate side. The question of how the bill process works have come up often. I've been told this graphic really helps. So really, you start with the idea. Then the drafting process happens, which is already passed. Introduction of the bills, which many are happening, has happened last week. Committee review, which many will be going through this week. Mobilization, support, testify, hearing. Many organizations coming up at this level next week. There's going to be 4 debates. Crossover, which means Senate bills will go to the House. House bills will come to the Senate because we need both chambers to vote on the bill. There'll be a conference committee if you disagree on the bill and you want to talk about amendments with each of the chamber. There'll be a final vote, and Governor Spanberger had the option to veto or pass the bill. To begin with, I want to talk about the ADU bill, accessory dwelling units bill by Delegate Cohen and Senator Srinivasan, also known as HB 611 and SB 531. This legislation will legalize accessory dwelling units in residential zoned single family and ADUs are smaller secondary homes located on the same lot as a primary residence and owned by the same person as the main home. The picture on top will really help you understand multiple options for how ADUs can be included. The bill specifically is made to have independent living and sleeping space. It has a full kitchen and bathroom, separate access. It is for permitted use in all single family zones. It allows for at least 1 ADU per property. It has a $500 cap on permit fees, a 30-day minimum lease. This is to prevent short-term rentals. The bill requires a minimum 30-day lease for ADU occupancy. And it also has the owner occupancy that is allowed. So homeowner can choose to live in either the main house or the ADU at the time of the application. It's important to note that the bill does not override HOA or condo covenants, does not affect existing ADU permits, and respects the local ordinance adopted before 2025 that comply with the law. Local government retain authority over health, safety, historic districts, stormwater, building codes, and emergency access. The next thing that we have is a very popular one, as many of you know, Faith in Housing by Delegate Cole, Senator Carol Foy, and Senator McPike, which will be rolled in together. The Faith in House legislation establishes clear guidelines and requirements for affordable housing development by institutions and tax-exempt nonprofits. This is to ensure that long-term affordability and community have integration. This bill protects the right of these organizations to build income-restricted affordable home on land they own, while also increasing localities' power through a new administrative approval process. Just from key provisions of the bill, this is for congregation nonprofit owned for 5 years and more. The property must be owned by the congregation or tax exempt nonprofit for at least 5 years prior to applying for affordable housing development. It should at least 60% of the new homes must be affordable to residents earning 80% of the area median income or less for rental homes at 120% for sale homes. Affordability for 30 years. The affordable home must remain affordable for at least 30 years to ensure the long-term impact. And the development must comply with the Virginia Fair housing law, include conceptual height restrictions, as well as potential requiring 1 parking spot per home. This is really to establish clear guidelines and requirements for affordable housing development by faith institutions and tax nonprofits. The next one we have is known as Housing Near Jobs for many, is HB 816 and SB 454 by Senator Van Valkenburg and Delegate Helmer. This is a streamlined conversion of old strip malls. This legislation allows multiple family homes to be approved, administered by local government in commercial zones. It also is to propose that includes income restricted affordable homes shall be restricted to expedited review. This is to really speed up the process. And this is aiming also to transform underutilized commercial areas into thriving communities with a mix of housing and business. Ensure this legislation streamlines the process for converting underutilized commercial property into mixed-use communities with affordable housing and business options. The next one we have is HB 262 and SB 354 by Delegate Shelley Simons and Senator Salim, known as the parking reform legislation. For those of you who don't know, local governments have required developers to build a fixed amount of parking, often far exceeding actual demand and leaving large areas of unused pavement. This really mandates mandated raising housing costs, burden small businesses, and encourage car-dependent sprawl. So what this bill really does, it removes minimum parking requirements, intends to lower housing costs in this way, and helps support smarter growth. Next, we have HB 655 and SB 346, also known as the Manufactured Housing Bill by Delegate Michelle Maldonado and Senator Van Valkenburg. This is really expanding protection for manufactured housing, requires localities to allow manufactured homes in all zoning districts where side building is already permitted, not just agricultural zones. Ensures that it prohibits the use of development standards, effectively excluding manufactured housing, and requires them to be treated as the same as inside built single homes. So really, this is to remove the ability to restrict where manufacturers' homes can be placed and still have the same standards for equity in our community for those living in manufactured housing. Then we have HB 4, Preservation of Affordable Housing by Delegate Bennett Parker. This allows localities to require property owner to offer publicly supported housing to locality or qualified designee before selling to the buyer. It also keeps housing affordable for at least 15 years, and it's to prevent displacement of low-income households by preserving affordability. Really, this legislation is to empower local government to preserve affordable housing by establishing a right of first refusal, ensuring long-term affordability and preventing displacement of low-income residents. Then we have SB 488 by Senator Van Valkenburg, known as statewide housing target. Localities must increase housing stock by at least 7.5% over the year starting in 2028. Localities can choose this option to show a good faith in order to meet housing growth target. And he's laid out 3 housing growth strategies, one which is include upzoning, by right approvals, and incentives for affordable housing. The bill gets into more complications, but you can read that in depth when I share out the links. We have SB 594, which is expediting affordable housing by Delegate Shelley Simons. Allows localities to create an administrative process to approve rezoning applications for affordable housing and development in suitable locations. It also reduces delays. It expedites the approval process, lowering the financial burden on affordable housing developers by reducing delays and uncertainty. And it also streamlines the development process. It enables faster construction and occupancy of much needed affordable housing. Really, this bill is to reduce delays, lower financial risk, and accelerate delivery of more affordable housing in the community. We have HB 867, Affordable Dwelling Unit Ordinance by Delegate Ray Cousins and Senator McPike. This is to allow locales to create optional density increase for moderately priced housing in their zoning ordinances. This also enables locales to offer developers with increased density or other incentives to build more affordable housing homes. And it also authorizes the state to give local government more tools to address affordable housing needs. This is by Delegate Cole, is for unhoused person homelessness. It's a really incredible bill. This prohibits discrimination against unhoused individuals, so it prohibits locales from imposing penalties on those who are engaging in sustaining activities such as public service or legally parked vehicles. And this is so those, if you see, who are like the homelessness community, when they have someone sleeping, resting, sitting, or standing, lying down, it protects them from these basic rights. And it's really centered around dignity and basic human needs for those who are homeless, preventing the criminalization of homelessness. And then finally, so there's tons of bills, but a couple of funding ones that I want to talk about is the Virginia Housing Trust Fund, which is to increase $200 million annually to expand affordable housing and supportive housing opportunities, invest $50 million in the Virginia Homelessness Solution programs, including $2 million for provider capacity. Another one for Virginians with disability, expanding housing opportunities for Virginians with disability, investing $5 million more in PSH and SRAP, and a few other that you'll see here. But I hope that's real helpful. I know that was a lot and it was really quick, but there's so many bills that are happening that truly it's hard to get over all of them, but these are the top ones that we chose to really highlight.
Thank you so much, Anika, for your presentation. I appreciate all the information you shared with us. And now I'd like to welcome Delegate Ken Plum. Ken, the microphone is yours to introduce yourself and share with us some of your knowledge of the General Assembly process and advice for how we as advocates can be most effective as we advocate for change.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm pleased to be with you. And when I see your agenda, I realize what a task you have in mind ahead. I put in this picture because I want you to know that one time I was young. And the reason I put that in is because sometimes people want to talk about how old I am, but what I want to do is to share with you some things that I've learned over the years to try to make this process work. And when you look at the complexities of your agenda, I realize how significant it is that we talk about how the legislative process works, okay? I put this slide in semi-quincentennial because I can never say it unless I'm looking at it, to remind us again, okay, that this is, okay, the American Revolution year, not okay, back up one. The American Revolution was, if you look at Ken Burns' PBS series on the PBS broadcast, you know that awful lot of battles in the American Revolution. And if you didn't know the outcome from this story from the beginning, you would really be upset because we lost an awful lot of those battles. But in the end, of course, the French came to our rescue and we were able to get ourselves together and we actually ended up winning. But above that is what was happening in the Continental Congress, and the gentleman there with the sandy hair and a tall Thomas Jefferson was writing a document that became so important to us, okay? That is, of course, the Declaration of Independence. And we bring that up today, and I apologize, I'm an old historian, and I have to put everything in context. The fact that it's happening now, it actually relates to 1776, okay? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that by endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The reason it's important to remember this is that we are living in a country where we take as a given that all men are created equal, and these have these inalienable rights, okay? We don't have any kings, and we make that point these days. Okay. We put together a constitution to say we the people, and central to the way the government works, and so important for you to realize as you go about your work, it's about we the people. Okay. We don't live in a democracy where everybody goes to Richmond to cast a vote. capital wouldn't hold us all. But we live instead in a republic. And what's significant about a republic is that a republic is represented by people. And those people, of course, are elected representatives, but there are also other categories. Okay? We cast our votes as the way in which we, as a member of a republic, have a say in it, but also we look at other ways that we can have a voice. Okay? We can look at campaigning. Campaigning is a way that one has a voice to say in this, and there's lobbying and advocating and legislating. Now, I want to point out to you that sometimes when we talk about this subject, some people will say, well, this is all about politics, and I don't want anything to do with politics. Well, my friend, I want to disavow that notion. This is not about politics. This is about the Republican form of government and ways in which you as a citizen and ways in which you as advocates play a role in terms of how it is that the outcome is decided. Campaigning is something that happens during a political season leading up to election day. It's about political parties and how political parties operate and how PACs work and so on. That's not what we're talking about today. It's also about lobbying. Lobbying is about paid people who go to work to Richmond and to Washington, D.C. to have the outcome of elections. And certainly some of you provide lobbying services to your local governments or to your communities. But what we're really focusing on is advocating. And what is advocating and how does it relate to legislating, okay? So don't be concerned about whether you like politicians or whether you like them or not, because whom we are going to be dealing with, and not the politicians, you're not going to be dealing with the lobbyists. You may have contact with lobbyists. Sometimes they share common interests with you, but you're going to be an advocate who's going to work with legislators. As an advocate, then, you're going to be work with legislators to determine the outcome of legislation, okay? You're going to advocate. Advocate means that you're going to use various techniques and methods by which you can change opinions or inform people. In fact, it might be said that the most effective way to advocate is to educate. The most effective way to advocate is to be a good communicator. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the inside about how it is in the legislative halls. You can be most effective, as the title of our presentation today indicates, at advocating, okay? So advocating is about, or advocacy is about supporting or arguing for a cause of policy or individual rights aiming to influence decisions within political, economic, and social systems, okay? Now, don't try to take this down and don't try to write it down, because I'm going to give you a website in a minute that's going to talk to you about how this happens. But there are a number of ways in which, through the legislative process, you can advocate. And you can advocate any day of the week by having conversations and contact with elected representatives, be they at the local, state, or federal level. But we're going to focus today on the fact that the General Assembly is now meeting in Richmond as we speak, and we're going to look at how that works. A bill could be introduced in the House of Delegates, or it could be introduced in the Senate. The key thing to remember is that all bills, whether introduced in the House or the Senate, go to a committee. And even more now, so we have to know, they go to subcommittee. And so when it is that we're trying to target the people we have to influence, certainly in the end, we're going to need the votes of the total bodies in order to get a bill passed. But initially, we're going to have to convince the people who make up the membership of subcommittees, and you can find those all on a website that I'm going to give you in just a minute, who make up the members of that subcommittee who have to report to the full committee, and you have to convince enough majority of this full committee in order for it to be presented to the floor. And then at the floor, there will be a debate on your bill. And if a majority bill passes after the debate, it can go over to the next house. And guess what? On the other side, go through the same thing again. Now you may say, well, this seems awfully complicated. And I would say to you, there was a reason for that complication. And this process is evidently written down by Thomas Jefferson in Jefferson's Manual, if you were wondering why I'm continuing to talk about the history of all this. But it was written down by Thomas Jefferson to ensure that not a single interest could slip a bill through the legislature. It's difficult to get bills passed. In fact, I was doing research for this and came across an article I wrote some time ago about how a bill does not become a law. Sometimes it's easier to explain how it doesn't become a law than it is to how it is becoming a law. So the point being is that you as an advocate can work with members of subcommittees, members of the committee, and the total membership of the body in order to get the required number of votes ultimately to get the bill passed. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. VGA.virginia.gov. Take that down and remember it and keep it in your contact list. It will be a place where you can go and click on who is my legislator. That's a good piece of information for people that you're working with to know. You can click on tracking legislation. It'll take you to the legislative information system so that you can actually look up bills by number, know where they are in the process, and where it is you might have an opportunity to have an impact on. It also has all the members listed, as well as the committees on which they serve. You're going to need to know that because when you take a look at what Anika was talking about in terms of who introduced the bill and the committees they go to, you're going to need to know the names of all those committee members. Seems like an awful lot to get to know, but you don't need to memorize it all. You just go to vaga.virginia.gov. It's the portal for the citizens to get involved in the legislative process. Important to remember. Okay. Now, this is how a bill becomes a law as it's described, and I'm not going to go through those steps because I've kind of outlined them all before. But the point I want to make about this is how a bill becomes a law as it relates to you as an advocate means that in subcommittees and full committees, you're often given an opportunity to stand up as a citizen or as an advocate and speak on behalf of that legislation. Not talking politics now, we're talking about legislating. We're not talking about campaigning, we're talking about legislating. We're talking about your role as an advocate, being able to affect how a bill becomes a law by providing essential information. Now, here's a little inside note, and I'm really realize we're recording this, and I hope my colleagues don't get too upset with me by sharing this piece of information with you. But General Assembly members are not experts on all the subjects that come before them. There are 140 of them, and there are 2,500 bills and resolutions. There's no way you can know all there is to know all those things. So as a consequence, we have to depend upon sources of information in making our decisions and how we vote in committees and how we vote on the floor. We get that information through people who are professional in their field that provide information, research, and so on, studies and so on that we've conducted between legislative sessions. And from all that, we then turn to advocates. And the question will be to you from time to time will be, how do you stand? Now, folks, I'd like to have you believe that you can go to Richmond and make a big, long speech and have everybody impressed with your oratorical skills. But the fact of the matter is they're really busy. And sometimes it's difficult to get to see them, but that shouldn't keep you from making an effort. When you go to a subcommittee, plan on offering your testimony in 3 minutes. 3 minutes? This is complex stuff. Well, I'm sorry, but we don't have an endless amount of time to spend. And if you can't describe it in 3 minutes, it's chances are the legislature is not going to be able to deal with it because it's going to be too complicated. Chances are the bill has too broad import to be able to deal with. So you get your information down to 3 to 5 minutes, and you realize there are 10 other people in the room who represent the same group you represent. So what you do in the subcommittees, you line up. You take your best spokesperson, they make the presentation, and everybody behind it says amen. And that constitutes then the totality of the testimony. It's done precisely, planned, and directed so that we can get the message to legislators with an understanding of what you're saying is reflective of what a lot of people think and what they ought to be doing. Okay? The issue that you're dealing with is a critical one. Housing can't wait. In Virginia, we have a critical housing shortage, as is true throughout the country. okay? Housing is a human right. It's not a luxury. So it's something that we as advocates have to impress upon the total community and upon legislators generally in order to make progress, okay? The complexities of it are best outlined by those 10 bills that were defined, that were outlined already. We have to be able to figure out how to respond to each of those in turn. During this past opening of the General Assembly session in Richmond, the governor spoke to the opening session of the General Assembly. And I will tell you, I've been to 44 opening speeches of governors in the General Assembly. And this was the best one ever when it comes to housing. In fact, I think if you take a look at the majority of the speeches in the past, you will find that the word housing was not mentioned. Not this time this was the case. Here's what our governor had to say, okay?
I have also directed a comprehensive multi-agency review of regulations and permitting practices that impact our ability to build new homes. We need to cut red tape, eliminate burdensome requirements, and streamline approvals. We need to get ready to build more housing, and that's why I am establishing a commission on unlocking housing production. The third issue in our Affordable Virginia agenda is housing. And this issue is so personal for so many Virginians. Young people who grew up here and want to stay here but cannot find an apartment they can afford. Families who have saved for years but still cannot compete in the housing market. Seniors on fixed incomes watching their rent climb higher every year or unable to downsize because they can't buy something else. We have a housing shortage in Virginia, and until we address it, prices will keep rising. So here's what we're going to do. First, we are going to protect renters. Right now, Virginia law gives tenants just 5 days to respond after a landlord files to terminate their lease. 5 days. That's not enough time to get your next paycheck, let alone find a new place to live. Our legislation will extend that window to 2 weeks, giving families a fair chance to get that paycheck, pay their rent, and stay in their homes. Secondly, we are going to give communities more tools to build affordable housing. Not every solution works in every locality. What works in Arlington probably wouldn't work in Accomack. Our proposal will empower local governments to adopt affordable housing programs that fit their needs, because the people closest to the problem are often best positioned to solve it. These are common sense proposals. They're not about ideology. They're about results. And I'm asking every member of this General Assembly, Democrat or Republican, to work together to put these bills on my desk as soon as possible. Because here's the truth, affordability, it's not just a family budget issue, it's an issue of economic competitiveness. When a Virginia college graduate cannot afford to live near their job, they're going to move to Maryland or Georgia or Texas. And when healthcare costs rise, small businesses face higher expenses and workers have less money to spend out on the economy. When a family can't afford childcare, oftentimes a parent drops out of the workforce altogether. If we fail to act on affordability, we risk slower economic growth, lower tax revenue, and declining productivity, consequences that would disadvantage Virginia for decades to come. So make no mistake about it, we are competing against 49 other states for the best talent in the United States of America and the businesses that follow that talent. If we do not act, we will lose out in that competition. And on my watch as governor, I do not intend to lose. I intend for Virginia to dominate.
You can join in that applause if you like. If you want a copy of what the governor put out in the executive order, you can get a copy of that, okay? And it includes just what she just said there, giving a priority to housing. So that's something we can build on, okay? So look at strategies for effective advocacy. Here's what we have going for us this time. We have an administration and a governor committed to our cause. To the degree that we can look at our priorities and relate them to her priorities, it strengthens our hand, because what she has is a bureaucracy that people that you're familiar with who know about these issues are going to help her get her legislation package passed. And to the degree her legislative package passes, then of course it furthers our cause. Now, it could be that some things in those legislative packages you would not be necessarily support, and you have to work that out as part of the negotiation process as the legislature continues forward. It's going to be a good day for housing in Virginia, I think. Now, here's what we have to remember. The legislature's in session. We know how to go about this. We know how to work together in the alliance that you already have to strengthen our cause, to get our message clear. And then we have to, over a period of time, look at relationship building. Because in the final analysis, the legislature is about 100 men and women, more women than ever before, incidentally. Not only our first woman governor, but more women in the legislature than ever before. More minorities in the legislature than ever before. The Virginia House General Assembly now looks much like the population of Virginia. That's to our strength. Over a period of time, we want to grease the wheels of communication. In other words, we want to have an opportunity over a period of time to start to build trust with those legislators. So we're going to do as much as we can this legislative session, and I think we're going to make progress with that. But over a period of time, we also want to stay in touch with those legislators and let them know that we exist, have them come to all of our ribbon cuttings, give them due credit for what they're doing. If what they're doing is providing leadership, we'll give them a plaque to show that's true, give them the total recognition that they deserve, and that will enable senators and delegates over a period of time to appreciate what it is that we've been doing in the legislative session. Next, okay. So certainly we can verbalize to people, and if we have receptions and so on, we can have informal times to talk to legislators, and that's very effective to talk in an informal setting about what you're talking about. You don't necessarily have to remember the bill number, you just have to get the concept of what you're trying to get across. Let me warn you in advance, for those who have not been to Richmond during the legislative session, it's very chaotic. It's very chaotic because there are 140 legislators, 2,500 bills and resolutions, and a zillion. Last time I looked, there were 7 lobbyists for every legislator. So a lot of people about. So how do we crack through that? Well, if you expect to get a set time to meet with a legislator, you're probably going to be disappointed because most of the time they're in committee. So you have to kind of figure out with their staff when it might be that you could get a chance to come by and present your message. Don't be disappointed with that. Don't let that hesitate you. Continue to work with them. You know, lobbying is the term that's used because most of the communication takes place in the lobbies as people pass through the halls. That's how we get the term. Written communication is okay. Again, recognize the volume of written legislation is such it's sometimes hard to get a message through. The written message, it seems to me, is best when it tells a story. When it talks not about the statistics of housing, but it talks about some human beings in the community and what they're experiencing. You can do the same thing in face-to-face meeting if you in fact get an opportunity to go into the office and take along some folks who feel the effects of our housing crisis. You can in fact then deliver a message. And then there are, of course, nonverbal means now the multiple systems that we have for communication. Okay. It's also about a philosophy. Here's a potential philosophy I'd ask you to consider. I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. A whole lot of those changes occur in the legislative system. We as individual citizens can cast a vote. That's critically important. It's amazing to me how many people don't bother to do that. with early voting now and absentee voting and so on, there's no reason for not voting. But then when we take on roles in associations, faith communities, local government, and so on, were we to bring about change, we have to methodically think about how that might be done. We build relationships with those who make the laws, and from those relationships, then we provide good information. We're very succinct. We're telling stories about people who are experiencing what it is we're trying to change. And we continue to provide support to those legislators who are forwarding our calls. In that kind of way, we're looking at systems that haven't been changed in the past that can be changed. Again, I think it's going to be a glorious day for housing. We've got a wonderful governor who's providing leadership. And I know through your alliance and a number of communities now that have staff assigned to housing that we can realize some success. Some thoughts on my part about how you might go about your business.
Thank you so much, Ken and Anika, for your presentations. We really appreciate all the information and wisdom that you had to share. So now we're going to switch over into the Q&A portion of our presentation. So if you haven't done so already, please type your questions into the chat. And then just a note that to respect everyone's time, we will plan to wrap up today right at 1 p.m. So we may not get to everyone's questions, but we'll certainly get to as many as we can. And the first question that I saw in the chat was, it reads, in Arlington, we are lucky to be represented by officials who already care deeply about the issues we bring to them. Our advocacy isn't about convincing them to act. They're often championing our causes already. How can we best use our time with them? What is most effective? Leave behind one-pagers, data, constituent stories, etc., that we can provide them with to support their work toward our shared goals. Ken, do you want to start with that one? And maybe Anika can fill in if she has something to share as well.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would suggest we start with gratitude. There's some people who are committed to this cause, and what we ought to do is give them a recognition. Thank you for what you've been doing to represent those who are unhoused, those who need our services. Secondly, we've been really privileged to see what you're doing, and let us offer you this information. Now, when you offer information, if you're going to verbalize it, it's going to be 3 to 5 minutes at most. And secondly, if it's written, it's going to be 1 page. Now, if you can't get boiled down to that, it's probably too complicated for humans to consider. So work on getting the message focused and deliver that message then, certainly in person to the degree that you can do that. And in the office whenever, but back home in social settings or in gatherings that you set up so that you can have contact with the legislator. We're not campaigning. We're not trying to elect or unelect anybody. We're trying to acknowledge that there are men and women who commit their lives to good legislation, and they need good information. We as advocates provide that key role of providing that information.
You can. Anika, did you have anything else you wanted to share on that topic? It's okay if not.
Thank you.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. Another question in the chat reads, does the bill setting local goals establish individual goals for specific levels of AMI? Anika, maybe that's one if for you to start with if you have anything to add.
My understanding is that when a housing bill sets its local goals, it does not automatically mean establish separate mandatory target for each AMI, like 30, 50, 80 AMI percent. It usually requires jurisdictions to set the overall affordability on production goals. And it's just an AMI category to reference as a guide and reporting bucket, but not a hard quota unless the bill explicitly says that that's the case. They usually go by the jurisdiction's guidance.
Anika?
Happy to hear Delegate Plum if you want to add anything.
No, I have nothing to add to that.
No problem. Thank you. And I did notice in the chat a few folks asked about getting copies of any of the presentations, plus the link to the governor's address, which we certainly can share both those things afterwards. Seeing no other questions right now, and please, there's still time, so please feel free to add anything. I can move over to some of the questions that actually, there's another one that just came in that said, what hurdles does the governor face in getting her affordable housing agenda passed in the legislature?
Well, it's an uphill battle in the sense that housing as a human rights issue is not a generally accepted concept. It's increasingly becoming so because the unhoused are becoming such a matter of concern. But until that is accepted, it will always be an uphill battle. What she has, I believe, however, because of the diversity now within the legislature, she has a greater potential for doing that than maybe in the past we've had. Secondly, some of these bills have cost. The budget is not unlimited. If you look at the totality of her address, she'll tell you she's going to do something about education, and she is. She'll tell you she's going to do about transportation, and she will. But all those things have a price tag. So sometimes we have to figure out what the cost is going to be relative to total budget available and what other needs are competing. So to the degree that we can get all that wedged together through the Appropriations and Senate Finance Committee to be a whole, it can be an outcome. Further, however, we need to also make sure that we get our act together as advocates. We do not want to have competition among ourselves. Now, some of these issues like zoning, some of these issues about what targeting levels ought to be, can be controversial. But from out of controversy needs to come a joint agreed upon solution. We do not get all that we want in one legislative session. My friends, I introduced a bill in capital punishment, and it took 40 legislative sessions to get it passed. I introduced a bill for redistricting using an impartial redistricting commission. It took 40 years to get it passed. Now, your housing, we've made progress over the years. But I will tell you, when I first went to the legislature in 78 and 80, the word housing wasn't in the discussion. Now it's a discussion at the highest level. So we're going to make incremental progress. But as advocates, we need not to compete among ourselves. We need to kind of come to an agreement as to how much can we move forward. And I'm not asking you to give up on the cause. I'm asking you to figure out what are the incremental steps that we can take. How much can we get this year? How much can we build on next year? What kind of study could we put in place to gather more information? How can we get things lined up for succeeding times in order to accomplish that purpose?
You can, the small achievable wins, right, that add up to big wins over time. Anika, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Delegate Plum, for going just the reality behind the scenes. I will also add, working for the members' office on our side, that you may not realize as soon as you coming in asking us to support a bill, there's like 3 other groups coming into the offices telling us why it's a bad idea, the unintended consequences, why it would harm in the future. And these are all the things that, including the governor's office, have to consider. So just to be mindful. I mean, it's still, but this is the whole point of lobbying and advocating, is coming up with those benefits on why it's good, but just the reality of they get calls telling them why it's not going to be great shit to be passed. Yeah.
Now, don't be turned off by what we just said.
Yeah.
All we said is that we're going to make incremental progress.
Yeah,
and
and that's the case.
As big a step as we can this time around, and we're going to build on it in successive times. Now, what you're doing is not brand new because you've made progress in the past. We have an opportunity to make an even bigger step, I think, this time, and on successive legislative sessions, get closer to our goals.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality. Like, some people come to the office, like they want 100% what did they pass, but a compromise can still be a win. If you can get 50, 60% of what you can get passed and come back another year to get the remaining 40%, those are strategies that I would personally say still a win, and to like do incremental progress, like Delegate Plum said. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. So another question that just came in reads, is there any bill or proposal like the laws in California and New Jersey where the state suspends a locality's zoning powers if they do not approve housing plans fast enough? In other words, a stick to enforce compliance in addition to carrots.
Well, I'm not aware of a specific proposal. Anika, maybe you can help us with that. But I would say to you that when I was talking about us coming together, one of the things we have to come together on would be the competing interests of local governments. This thing of zoning laws and how zoning, all the opinions, as you all know, differs across the state. So there's a degree that we can, through the Association of Counties, through the Municipal Association and so on, try to get some common agreement as to how it might work. It's one of those things where you, again, have to negotiate an outcome. Will Virginia force all local governments to do X in relation to housing? Probably not. Could it be, however, that Virginia would allow regions of the state or municipalities of certain size in order to undertake this? That's possible. And when we do that, you see, we've made a step forward by allowing, say, Northern Virginia, or allowing Fairfax County, or allowing Arlington to go forward with something that in the future, when somebody realizes, oh my gosh, the world didn't come to an end when they did that, maybe we should do it too, then you've made steps toward progress.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anika?
I don't know if a bill like that exists. I don't think it does. I think a lot of this year's bill are both steps to getting closer to like making sure that they can set certain boundaries that General Assembly can do over the county. But I will say they are extended colleagues. People like the supervisors and delegates and like senators are extended colleagues. Just keep in mind they do try to work together. And I don't know if this would be a good bill for them to do, but it doesn't exist that I know of.
Thanks, Anika. So another question that just came through says, do you believe that the red counties in Virginia will take up the governor's offer to tailor affordable housing support to the needs to a specific area? What will that mean to increases in affordable housing availability?
Have I disappeared?
No, we see you. We see you and hear you. At least I do.
You can hear me still?
Yep, we can hear you.
Well, I would say to you that, again, I'm not good at prophesizing for sure what a legislative body might do, but I would say that when I look at the composition of the legislature and I look at the executive leadership, I believe we have greater opportunities for moving forward than we have in the past. So we've got to think positively about this, recognize realities, but build on the positives that we have.
Absolutely. With a few minutes left, I want to switch over to some of the questions that came through from the audience prior to our program, because so many participants sent in so many good questions. I pulled just a few, and I'm sorry we won't get to every one, but some of these speak to just the process of meeting with your legislators, and I hope this isn't repetitive. But one of the questions that I wanted to share was, so what is the best way to schedule a meeting with a delegate or senator? How does that work?
Again, I would ask you not to be discouraged if you call up a legislative office and you can't get a set time to meet with the legislator. In some of the end years that I was there, meetings were scheduled as early as 7 o'clock in the morning and would run until 6 in the evening, with committees to 4 sessions to committees, and there wasn't any time left. So what you might have to do is to talk to the legislative aide. Don't expect a long conversation. Get to the point of what you're about and leave that one pager behind, so that when I come to the office at 6:30, it's stacked up on my desk, this one pager with the important points in bold type, with a reference if I want to know more about it, how I can go about it. You can also, again, try to get a meeting, but sometimes when you show up for the meeting, they're not there. It's not because they don't want to see you and they're hiding. It's just a busy, busy time. And I want to emphasize that it's a busy time. So sometimes you hang around, and sometimes you see them in the hall. Sometimes you see them on their way in and out of committee and so on. You let yourself be known. That's why it's so important to develop a relationship back during the legislative session, so that they get to know you and you know them. And as a result of that, then you can talk quickly and so on. And you follow up with that brief meeting with a little note. Dear Ken, I was so delighted to see you in the legislature. You're such a handsome legislator. You do such a great job. We will support my bill. But you do things that is to try to, again, establish relationships. I've gotten dozens of those notes.
Thank you. Anika, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, as a former staffer, like there's so many, like you can't, like time is different in that building. It moves. You don't even eat, you're not even hungry. You don't even realize where time goes. That you should, like, if you don't hear back from a staffer about scheduling follow up twice in the week because it just falls through the crack and with other emails, just bump it up. Mornings are best, like early mornings or evenings, but like from 10 to like 4, depending on when floor session ends, it's really hard to get the members to meet with you.
A lot of people call on the fact that I get to the office at 8 o'clock in the morning, so they would come by at 8 o'clock. And not necessarily a scheduled meeting. We would not necessarily sit down. We'd have a little conversation at the door where I got the message.
Yeah, you could do drop by. Some delegate, like many delegates would be like, hey, yeah, I have 2 minutes or 5 minutes, let them in. Yeah.
Those leave behind materials that we've talked about, is it helpful to send emails with links to more information and some, resources to learn more, or are really those simple printed 1 or 2 pagers more helpful? Do you all have anything to share about that?
Yeah, I think you have to have the 1 pager. First of all, when you say what group you're with, I may or may not hear you, or I may or may not understand you. But if you hand me something with your logo and your name on it, I could figure it out. I can look at it. But furthermore, then too, it requires us to boil down to the essence of what we're about. So I say 1 page. Maybe you slip over and do a little bit on the back, but try not to do that if you can help it. That you would then be able to transmit your information that way. That can be followed up then by emails or whatever. All those things then, the way in which you deal with the complexity is you put the website in there. It used to be we didn't have a way to have people go to get additional information. Now there are oodles of ways in which you can get additional information. And if you put that website in there, they can, if they need additional information, go there. And certainly put your contact information. Yes, put your personal contact information, because if they want to get more information or ask you to come and speak before the committee, don't make it hard for them to get in touch with you. Make it a direct thing for them to get in touch with you to show up tomorrow. And when you get invited to speak before a subcommittee or a committee, don't be surprised to learn that when you get the call, the question is, can you come tomorrow?
And I'll just add, from a staff perspective, like I highly recommend following up with the 1 page electronically, just so we could they could look it up, control, just search it, and also you copy paste talking points for the members. It really helps versus having to dig through papers to look for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And then maybe I'll just ask one last one. And Ken, you shared a great online resource with us for tracking bills and issues, but I wondered if there were any other databases or websites or online resources that you all wanted to share that where folks can track the issues they care about or the bills they're watching, or maybe just pull contact information for their local legislators or state level legislators.
Well, I try to make it simple by giving you one, vga.gov. Because when you go to that one, you can get to the others. I could give you the LIS Legislative Information System website, and Anika may do that. But I'm saying to you, there's an easy way to remember where to get to and be able to click through. And when you get to Legislative Information System, you can put in the bill number, or you can put in the issue or whatever, and then get the whole summary, not only of what's been introduced, who's introduced it, where it's been assigned, what committee it's been assigned to, what action's been taken on it, where it is in the legislative process. It's an amazingly good system. Not to tell you an old story, but back when I first started, we didn't have digital information. We had pages, and we had lots of pages, meaning young people who helped us. One of the things they did was to come in every day and put together our bill books. Our bill books at the end of the session would be 6 feet wide to encompass all the bills and all the amendments and so on. You can now get that at a click with your finger. And Virginia has done an amazing job of digitizing all of its process, all of its systems and so on. So there's not a reason for not knowing. It's easy, you just have to go a little searching. And with this portal that I'm referring to, it's an easy way to get there.
I'll add, there's an incredible link. It's called Lobbyists in a Box. If you can sign up for the bill you want and the members, and each time the bill moves from committee to an amendment, it notifies you by email. Sometimes you look away from your screen for 5 minutes and somebody comes to the office. Oh, it's in committee. I'm like, how did you they sometimes advocates find out before the office because they're really monitoring the bill in their inbox. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful. And just taking a look at the time, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'm going to switch over to my little script that I have. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. And many thanks to Anika and to Delegate Plum, of course, for your time, your expertise, and your dedication to serving our community. So just a heads up that NVAHA will not be hosting a lunch and learn in February as we continue to track the General Assembly session and prepare for our local budget season. But please do be sure to visit NVAHA's website, stay in touch with our team, and be on the lookout for NVAHA emails for more resources, learning opportunities, and invitations to future lunch and learns. I hope everyone enjoys your day, stay safe and warm, and we hope to see you soon. Take care.